Liza Kaplan Montanino. I am the founder and owner of Rockabye Baby Sleep, and I feel really grateful to be here today. I am a dual certified sleep consultant in both pediatrics and special needs families. And what that means is I work with parents one-on-one to establish healthy and independent sleep habits for children from birth through age 12. I'm also a sleep health specialist, a newborn care professional, a lactation educator, a sleep expert with Indie Lab, and I do many workshops and trainings for parents, clinicians, psychologists, social workers, school districts, and other groups to educate on healthy sleep practices and how to improve what sleep looks like in your home. Before we get started, I do also want to be very transparent about what I am not. So I mentioned earlier, I'm a sleep consultant. I am not a medical professional. I am not a health practitioner. I don't have a degree in psychology or social work. But as a certified sleep consultant, I do work with families, mostly moms, at a particularly vulnerable time in their lives. And many parents come to me when they feel like they've hit rock bottom, that whatever they were doing to help their children sleep either no longer works for the child or no longer feels sustainable for the parents. Many of them are also really struggling with the adjustment to parenthood. And a large piece of that is because of the impact on sleep. So I feel very connected to this work. Um, this push-pull of I love my baby, I love my child, and being a mom is also really challenging. Not just with my sleep consultant hat on, but I connect with this work as a parent too. So I am a special needs mom times two. My son is on the spectrum and has sensory processing challenges, and my daughter has ADHD. And I am someone who has struggled with anxiety and depression off and on for an entire decade before becoming a parent, then navigating those things as a mom, and also someone who struggled with it for the decade since. I also had severe postpartum depression and anxiety after my son was born. I have been in therapy for the past 20 years, and I know firsthand the impact that not sleeping well, so not just sleeping at all, but that not getting quality sleep can have on mental health. It's one of the reasons that I am so passionate about helping families prioritize healthy sleep, both so that their children are well positioned to grow and meet developmental milestones, and also so that parents are getting the rest they need so that they're able to show up for their children as the kind of parent that they want to be. And I will be very honest with you that I did not set out to become a sleep consultant. This is not my first career. I didn't even know what a sleep consultant was or that sleep consultants were a thing that existed until I became a sleep deprived second-time mom. My daughter was a total unicorn sleeper, but I really did not know that until I had my son. And I felt completely unprepared for the kind of struggles that we experienced. We had a NICU stay. I hope it's okay that I share that. I know that information can be triggering in and of itself. We struggled with tongue ties, a lot of weight loss and jaundice. We struggled with lactation. We had really, really awful reflux. And when it came to sleep, I could rarely get a 3-hour stretch at night. And I became so sleep deprived that it really started to impact my mood. And because I didn't have that experience with my daughter, I felt like there was something wrong with me. I felt like I had done something wrong the second time around, that I was having such a negative experience with parenthood. When my son was about 10 weeks old, things were so difficult. It was actually my husband who pointed out to me that he thought I was suffering from postpartum depression. And I spoke with both my doctor, like my regular physician, and my therapist, and both unequivocally suggested that I go on antidepressants. And that combined with working with a sleep consultant to help sleep train my son really turned things around for me. And that experience really led me to this interest in the science behind sleep and the fact that it really is a process and a skill that we can learn. That is what led me to becoming a sleep consultant. I went through an entire certification program to learn all that I didn't know so that I could pay it forward to other moms struggling. And since that time, I have learned so much more about the how and the when and the why behind baby and infant and toddler sleep. And that's really, what I find so rewarding about this work now is being able to share that with other families experiencing something similar. And I think it's really important to normalize the difficulty that comes with having a newborn and the sleep deprivation that you experience, because it can be really easy to feel like it's something that you are doing wrong or you are responsible for. And just by being here today, taking the time to learn some of these tips and to learn about the connection between our sleep and overall well-being is putting you ahead of the game. So I'm really glad that you're here today. And one thing that I can tell you firsthand is, having had the privilege of helping more than 500 families get better sleep, I can say that there is a tremendous shift in a mother's mood and anxiety from the moment that I speak to parents at the beginning of our process together during that very first conversation where they're telling me about their child's sleep issues. There's a stark contrast between the mom that I meet and the mom that I get to celebrate and say goodbye to at the end of our process as we celebrate all of the success that parents and baby have made. And as I have worked with more and more families, it became really obvious to me, also through my own postpartum experience, that there's just really not a lot of postpartum support in our country. We're not set up to thrive postpartum. And there is information out there about newborn sleep and behavior and newborn patterns. But because sleep is natural, I think there's this widely held idea that it should be easy. And so the fact that it is something that can be a struggle and it's something that can require a lot of effort and nuance and thought and planning can be really disarming and confusing and frustrating, quite frankly, for new parents. And without the education and the support system to make healthy sleep choices or choices that prioritize your baby's long-term sleep habits, parents can fall into patterns and habits that they really don't find sustainable long-term, and their own sleep ends up being impacted. And that in and of itself can lead to a struggle with mental health. So there is, a big need, I think, for more accessible information on sleep. And through this idea that, we need to be supporting moms and each other more postpartum, the idea for a bit of like a wellness expo came to mind for me about a year ago exactly. There is so much prep that goes into creating a registry when you are pregnant, and all of the things, the stuff that you think you need. And on the other side, I can say that I think it's much more important to arm yourself with the resources and support rather than things. And so this idea led me to create the Westchester Wellness Mama and Child Wellness Expo this past November, where the entire idea was really providing mom with access to support, at, whether that is holistic or clinical, pediatric providers and providers for moms that are really experts in their fields and can all come together in one place to serve parents and young families. And time again, the response to this expo, and even just talking with other birth professionals about it, um, is, we don't always know what we need until we're in the thick of it. And so the goal of this expo was to help parents create a village for themselves before they hit rock bottom, so that they have all of these resources at the ready once they get to the other side of childbirth and labor. Um, and that experience and connecting with so many other perinatal professionals made it all the more clear to me that this really is a much needed but underserved need. I think it's really important to know that these resources are available throughout the perinatal journey, if you know where to look. And that's something that PSI has been doing really successfully for almost 40 years now, is connecting moms um, at any point in their postpartum journey with mental health support and resources. And so this feels very full circle to me, to be able to stand here and, having experienced postpartum depression and anxiety, and really be able to identify how we can use sleep education to improve our mental health and, improve a mom's ability to meet the demands of parenthood and all of the other hats that you might be juggling. So the first thing that I really want to dive into a little more deeply is just this connection between sleep and our overall health and well-being, and some of the evidence that we have supporting why sleep is so important. And my hope is that in sharing this information, that everyone watching feels a little bit more empowered to prioritize sleep, both for themselves and for their baby, and walks away with some strategies on how to do that. So, first and foremost, is this true? Does sleep really impact more than just our bodies? We know that if we don't sleep well, we don't physically feel that great the next day. But is the same thing true with our mental health? And the answer is absolutely yes. The fewer hours of sleep you get, the more likely you are to suffer a mood disorder, suffer from depression or anxiety, episodes of mania, and even suicide ideation. Sleep and mood are very, very closely related. Sleep is actually the number one mood resetter. So it's often why, as rough a day as you have, sleep can be really helpful at resetting your mood, if you're getting a quality number of hours at night. And that does not mean that we need to find a way to get 8 or 9 hours. The American Academy of Pediatrics actually revised its standard for magic sleep, reducing it from an 8 hours per night to 7 hours per night. So in order to protect your mental health, you actually don't even need a full 7. To protect your mental health, you need a core 5 hours of sleep. And this is the non-REM deep sleep that your body and brain need to repair and recharge. And if we don't get a minimum of 5 hours of continuous uninterrupted sleep, that's when we really start to see a breakdown in many of our body systems. So this can look like a weakened immune system where your body can't fight off germs as easily. It can impact your skeletal system as well, where muscle and tissue repair happens much more slowly during sleep than it ordinarily would, because sleep is the crucial time for physical repair. We also see a lot of impact on the brain as well. So it's not just the physical body. I mean, this here, you can see there's also an impact on our balance and coordination, and physical growth, as well as some of these conditions that we can be susceptible to. And if we look at the brain, look at all of these ways that poor sleep quality can impact us. Impaired cognitive function and trouble with memory. It can impact our ability to problem solve, to make decisions, to concentrate. We're at increased risk for anxiety and depression. It can be really difficult to regulate our emotions, and it can be that much more difficult to cope with change. So if we're not getting at least 5 hours of sleep on a continuous basis, our mental health declines. And this is just, it's scary and it's not okay. So what can we actually do about this? It's one thing to know that you need to get sleep, but how do you get it? So one thing, and perhaps one of the most important things, is that I think we have to start talking about insufficient sleep as being a problem with an actual qualitative and quantitative solution, rather than something that we should just accept and push through. And in order to do that, we need to educate folks on what is happening in our bodies and the science behind sleep. Because if we understand what's going on internally and what is at risk, we can begin to make changes that will have a positive impact on the way we sleep, which in turn is going to benefit our physical, emotional, and mental health. So now some of this information might be familiar, but as I mentioned earlier, sleep is a process. And because of that, there are actually two internal systems that help our bodies regulate sleep. The first is circadian rhythm, and the second is sleep pressure. And we need both in order to sleep well. Now, our circadian rhythm is the ebb and flow of melatonin, which is the sleep hormone, and cortisol, which is the alert hormone. And this is impacted by, sunrise and sunset, as well as by our typical daily routines. At bedtime, we want our melatonin levels to be high because that's going to help regulate our body clock and help us fall asleep. And we want our cortisol levels to be low so that we're able to sustain sleep throughout the night. Now, both of these hormones, melatonin and cortisol, are really heavily influenced by external factors such as light and temperature. And what makes that tricky is that as adults, we've had years of artificial forces like screens, like caffeine, that impact our natural circadian rhythm. And by the time we reach adulthood, that has led to sleep habits and a sleep schedule that doesn't always align with our internal body clock. Now, the second system that regulates our sleep is called sleep pressure. And that is the result of our body producing a sleep drive chemical called adenosine. And adenosine connects to neurons in the brain that inhibit brain function and cause sleepiness. Sleep pressure, though, is also susceptible to external forces because there are certain things that can work against it. For instance, caffeine works against adenosine. That's why drinking caffeine can make us feel alert, and why drinking caffeine in particular in the mid-afternoon or early evening can make it that much harder for us to fall asleep at night. Now, in order for us to get good quality sleep, we need our melatonin and sleep pressure to be high, and we need cortisol and brain activity to be low. This is sort of like an optimal sleep equation. Now, we talked earlier about why it's so important to get good sleep, all of the body functions that thrive when you're getting enough sleep. And we know how it works from a biological standpoint through these hormones and sleep processes. But what can you actually do to improve your sleep? We want to focus on two main things. The first is sleep environment, and the second is sleep hygiene. And when we talk about an optimal sleep environment, what we're really talking about is a space that is dark, cool, and quiet. And if we think about this from an evolutionary standpoint, we're sort of mimicking a cave. right? So the reason darkness is so important is because the receptors in our eyes collect data from light even when they're closed. And this is how our eyes help regulate our circadian rhythms so that they're in tune with nature. Again, helping us feel alert in the morning, near sunrise, and tired at night, near sunset. But our eyes are also more sensitive to light at night. So that's one of the reasons why it's very important and helpful to cover up lights when trying to sleep. This is also why it is really important to limit any kind of device use in the hour or two before bed. And the reason for that specifically is that the blue light that is emitted from an iPad, a laptop, an iPhone suppresses melatonin production. So it's telling your body, we need to stay alert. We are not ready for bed yet. And that's going to make it much, much harder to prepare your body for sleep if you are in bed on your phone or any of those devices. We also want it to be really, really cool. And the reason for that is because our core body temperature needs to drop by 2 degrees in order to synthesize melatonin. Now, the ideal temperature for an adult to sleep in is actually a cool 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Most of us are sleeping in rooms that are just too warm, especially when you factor in hormonal fluctuations and stress, both of which raise your body temperature. And many women in particular tend to run warm overnight. So cool, breathable fabrics for your bedding and pajamas are also really helpful at keeping the body at a cooler temperature. And a shower in the hour or warm bath in the hour or two before bed are also really helpful ways of cooling your body temperature down. It sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but by submerging your body or taking a shower before bed, you're actually allowing the heat to escape from your body through the extremities, which cools your body temperature down and makes it easier for your body to produce melatonin and fall asleep. Now, we also want it quiet. So we want to block out ambient noise and punctuating sounds, anything that's going to make it harder for you to fall asleep or to wake you up from sleep. So, slamming doors, a barking dog, a trash truck, anything that could potentially wake you up or disturb you as you're trying to fall asleep, we want to block that out. My favorite tool for this is non-looping continuous brown noise, which is particularly good for creating sort of like a sound bubble. It can also block out a snoring partner sometimes if they're not a particularly loud snorer. So these are some of the things that are really helpful in terms of creating an optimal sleep environment. But it's also just as important to establish a calming and relaxing bedtime routine. As I mentioned earlier, we want to start with a warm bath or shower because that's going to help lower your body's core temperature. The other reason that this can be so great as part of your sleep routine is that a bath or shower is so different than the rest of the day's activities that it's a strong trigger to the brain that sleep is coming. So after you do a shower or a bath, instead of turning on the overhead lights to brush your teeth and wash up, getting ready by a nightlight or by candlelight is actually much, much better for your circadian rhythm and melatonin production. So it's like telling your body, once you've done a shower or a bath and you've signaled to your body that it's in wind down mode, we want to do everything we can to promote that winding down rather than alerting your body again by turning on bright lights. We also want to engage in some really low impact and low stress activities before bed. This can be reading, again, not on a device unless it's like a Kindle Paperwhite, but it can be listening to a podcast, journaling, coloring, audiobook, and it really helps to do all of these things in your sleep space, but not actually in your bed. So if you have a chair or, like a recliner or something that you can do these activities in, that's really helpful. We don't want to get into bed until we're actually tired. This has been proven to increase sleep onset, which means the amount of time that it takes your body to go from awake to asleep. And it's also shown to cut down on the amount of time that you spend trying to sleep and potentially get frustrated when you're not falling asleep right away. So, what often happens though is that people get in bed before they're tired, or they get in bed and then they sit on their phone or iPad or whatever it is, whatever device they have that emits blue light. And that is also alerting their brain and telling their hormones to stay alert rather than sleep. And I have done this too. I am not immune to the allure of a phone in bed. It's very easy, and sometimes at the end of the day, it just feels very mindless, and it's kind of like a brain dump to be able to scroll in bed. But it really does work against trying to get your body to fall asleep. And one of the ways to think about this from a chemical and physiological standpoint is, if you are on a device, your body is creating more cortisol. If you're trying to fall asleep with more cortisol in your system than melatonin, you're more likely to lie in bed thinking about how frustrating it is that you're not asleep. And that tends to engage your sympathetic nervous system. What that does is actually trigger a fight or flight response. If your brain is in fight or flight mode, your body's going to produce even more cortisol because the body thinks that there is a threat and it wants to make sure that you have the energy you need to fight or to flee. And again, as we talked about earlier, the more cortisol in your system, the less likely you are to be able to fall asleep. And if you do fall asleep, the less likely you are to be able to sustain sleep for a longer chunk of time. And then this cycle of poor sleep and the negative thoughts that you have about not sleeping just sort of exacerbates the poor mental health that comes from not sleeping enough. So a relaxing bedtime routine plays another key role. But, it's not always that simple, right? Because as a society, we don't really prioritize sleep. We're told that we can have it all and do it all, but the understanding there is that sleep comes last. So we sacrifice sleep at the expense of having some me time, career advancement, productivity, social plans, family time, whatever it is. Sleep gets pushed out. And this is really problematic when we consider the impact that the demands of juggling paid work out of the home or in the home and non-paid work have on sleep. And again, as a result, the toll that that takes on our mental health. It is why burnout rates are higher than ever before, and why companies are offering mental health leave policies for the first time in history. Now, what I think is really tricky is that this is sort of like a chicken and egg situation, because studies show that mental health difficulties lead to problems sleeping, and poor sleep contributes to the onset, recurrence, and maintenance of mental health difficulties. So if we look at the postpartum population in particular, lack of sleep or sleep deprivation is one of the top struggles that parents have when they talk about the adjustment to parenthood. And of course, if baby isn't sleeping, mom is not sleeping either. So it's not surprising that when clients come to me, they are not just juggling and struggling trying to get their child to sleep. They're also struggling with how to manage their own sleep deprivation and how to get more sleep themselves. And one of the things that I try to prioritize with the families that I work with one-on-one is that we don't just want to help them get through the sleep deprivation. We actually want to help parents sleep better. So this is just one reason why I feel so fortunate to be working with the perinatal community, because if we can give mom permission to prioritize her sleep, it can change the way that she functions in the world. general well-being, emotional health, mental health, physical health, really everything. And if mom is getting the sleep that she needs, we know that her mental health is more likely to improve, and she's able to show up to parenthood with a more sustainable long-term approach that's really going to benefit the entire family dynamic. So, how exactly do we help someone who says that they're concerned about their mental health because of lack of sleep? Well, one thing that I find really, really helpful is normalizing that ask. This is so important because none of us can do this alone. We are not meant to do this in silos. But I think there is still a stigma about asking for help or saying you need more support or admitting to struggle. The guilt and shame that women feel when they can't do it all or when they admit that they are having a tough time is everywhere, and it's really exacerbated by social media. So we need to normalize this asking for help and also recognize it as a sign of strength and courage. Now, of course, we can also educate on the benefits of sleep and the risks of what getting poor sleep can do to a person's short and long-term physical and mental health. And I think another way that Postpartum Support International in particular, but really anyone who is working in women's health can make a positive impact, is to call out and disrupt the rhetoric that we have been taught, both that equates motherhood with sleeplessness and the narrative that we have been told about sleep as self-care. I cannot stress this enough. Sleep is not self-care. It is not a luxury. It is a basic biological need. It's not something we are meant to function without. But when we treat sleep as something that is, nice when you can get it and something to slog through and just suck it up when you can't, we are really shortchanging an entire population of people. And it's one of the reasons why I think we see this motherhood martyrdom and burnout among so many new moms. So sacrificing sleep at the expense of doing and being everything else might be okay once in a while, but it is a short-term solution that people have turned into a lifestyle, and it's just not sustainable. Sleep is a biological function that our bodies are hardwired to need in order to survive and thrive. And we need to prioritize sleep and treat it as a requirement rather than a bonus in order to function properly and really to preserve and protect our mental health. And this is one thing that I coach my clients on all the time because they will often come to me when they are ready to prioritize sleep. But yet there are still so many emotional barriers that can get in the way of making progress. I mentioned before, there can be a lot of shame and guilt around admitting that you're struggling at all. And there can be a lot of shame and guilt around admitting that you're unhappy with any new aspect of parenthood. Your baby is beautiful, so how dare you complain? And that can be really invalidating and potentially harmful for a mom who is struggling because the subtext of that message is nothing matters more than your baby's needs. And the reality is, you cannot meet someone else's needs if you don't meet your own first. It is the entire idea behind putting on your own oxygen mask before helping someone else. But it can be really scary to admit that you need help and that you actually want to make change. So when I am working with a family one-on-one to prioritize healthy, independent sleep habits, it is my job not only to support parents through the process of teaching independent sleep skills, but also to coach them through the emotions that come up for both them and their child throughout the process. So I see moms who are incredibly anxious about sleep training, and about parenthood in general. Um, Part of my intake process involves questions about mom's maternal health and her medical history, especially when it comes to mental health in particular, because it's really important for me to know what kind of support mom does or does not have before we get started, so that when I am putting together a custom sleep plan for mom and for baby, that I'm suggesting things that align with her parenting style, with baby's temperament, with her emotional tolerance, with her discomfort tolerance, and that's mindful of her experiences if there has been trauma, if there have been fertility struggles. All of these things are really important for me to know before I work with a family, so that I can not only take it into consideration when I'm creating a sleep plan, but so that I can make sure that mom is set up with any additional resources she might need. So we talk about what it means when your baby is crying, crying as a form of communication and expressing sometimes needs, but sometimes also just, struggling to learn a new skill. We talk about setting boundaries. We talk about the difference between toxic stress and tolerable, predictable stress. We talk about secure attachment and what it means for a parent and a child to be securely attached, and how that is very different than attachment parenting. Now, I will admit that I do not always have all of the answers. There are so many moving pieces to this, complete picture of a person's health. But I love to collaborate with other professionals, and I'm very fortunate to have a large referral network of other organizations that I work with, clinicians that I train on sleep education, other doulas and pelvic floor therapists and licensed clinical professionals and yoga teachers, and on, because when we all work together to support a family, that is really when mom and baby are positioned to thrive, and when we're setting them up for better long-term sleep success. And I really do think that together, peer mentors, postpartum advocates, um, therapists, birth workers, there's really no greater impact on a person's mental health than the combination of sleep and this hands-on support. So I hope that you will continue to use PSI for the fantastic resource that it is. I hope you feel a little bit more empowered to reach out to a professional of any kind for any support you might need, whether that is with sleep or lactation or mental health or pelvic floor or otherwise. And I hope that you feel a little bit more confident in fighting for your own needs to be met, because that is really the first step, I think, in improving your own quality of life, so that you can show up as the woman, partner, parent, professional, whatever it is that you want to be, and better position yourself to thrive no matter what hat you are wearing. So I know this was a very broad topic and a big overview on something that is, very, very important and necessary for all of us. I'm more than happy to leave this contact information with you so that you can follow up one-on-one if you have any questions about how to improve your own sleep or your child's sleep, and what that can look like if we partner together.